Abhishek Khan. For those of you who've been attending in the past, you already know me. But for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is me. My contact details are already mentioned, my email and our office phone numbers in case you want to call in at any time, and my Twitter handle is also mentioned today. So the agenda is pretty much what you came here expecting, which is we're going to be talking about surviving agile testing. And one of the unique ways we have identified we can help is to actually go ahead and let you start automation even before development has handed you the code. So we'll take a look at how we propose we do that. We'll take a look at automation tests that are not brittle, but quite a bit of times you see that automation, as you record, it is functioning well, but then the moment you look at playing it back or executing it back, that sort of does not work at the same time. So we'll take a look at why most of those problems are, and something called flexible locators and how they can solve that problem. We'll look at some JavaScript application testing and some simple ways of addressing issues that JavaScript in web applications include, or because of which the complications arise. I was reading a research report which said that while earlier in the beginning of the web era, the pages were just a few kilobytes in size, today they are mostly in the range of about 3 MB. Now this change is primarily because of two things. One, because of the size of images and the number of images we've started to include, and number two, the number of JavaScript libraries we've started to use. So our applications have also become JavaScript heavy, which ultimately means that we have to find new ways of testing the complications or the specific issues that this JavaScript brings to fore. And finally, we have the modern strategies. Very quickly, we will look at, basically, this is a primer into responsive design, and we'll look at what are some of the things that you can look or you automation engineer to test responsive applications. So with that, let's quickly jump into seeing the tool that we'll be using today to take care of most of these issues. So this is Telerik Test Studio that Rohit has already introduced. But actually, this tool is also covered in Gartner Visionary Magic Quadrant. As you can see, Telerik is right down there. So the tool that you'll be working today with is a pretty enterprise-grade tool. Telerik, you know, is a company, and for those of you who do not know, is a company, it's a global team with over 700 people in 4 continents. And very recently, we've been bought over by even a bigger company called Progress, which has additional suite of products that would help with data and things like those. So with that, let me move forward and talk about the key trends. And the features that I'm going to talk about today are going to address these key trends. First of all is obviously productivity. Everybody wants the automation to be quicker, to be done easily, and the same set of testers delivering many more test cases and test scripts so that your coverage is higher and the quality is assured on the products that we deliver. However, we have not been given the same amount of time that the coverage demands, and we've been put into time-boxed sprints, or so lovingly called agile model of development, with start and finish clearly defined, and obviously developers developing to the last minute. Testers have a new challenge of how to do testing or automation, to be specific, in those scenarios when you're time boxed in the sprint timeline. And finally, obviously, a lot of mobile folks and as more and more mobile devices are being used, the challenges abound on how to test those applications as well. So today, primarily, we'll be looking at the first and the second scenario, and then we will jump on seeing a few more things. For those of you who are not aware of what Test Studio is, even after Lohit presented, this is a very quick view on the capabilities that Test Studio provides. So we have functional UI testing, and then we have performance testing, load testing. which is fully supported by a single suite called Test Studio. Most of you are familiar with different tools for doing different things, specifically for UI testing and for load and performance testing. So think about QTP, Load Runner, Selenium, and many more that are there. So in Test Studio, however, what we've done is we've leveraged the same test that you write for functional UI to be done for load testing as well. And of course, you know, we can also look at the manual testing through Test Studio, something what we call as assisted manual testing, and we have exploratory testing plugins available for testers to do a little unstructured exploratory work on the side as well. Okay, and finally we have the first thing that I talked about, which is productivity, and the basic gain that we bring to table with productivity is through the visual recorder that we have. The visual recorder allows you to not only record the test, but also record validations without having to write a piece of code. For those of you who are already familiar with Telerik Test Studio, this may be a repetition, but you know, for those of you who are new to Test Studio, this is just a quick look into getting started. You have cross-browser test recording as well as execution. So with Test Studio, you're no more limited to Firefox. You are no more limited to a specific browser, but really you can record in any of the primary browsers that are there in the market, namely Chrome, Firefox, IE, and Safari. And then you can play it back in any of those recorders as well. So you can record a test in IE, but play it back in Firefox, Chrome, and Safari, taking care of your cross-browser testing. And not only can you run tests on a single machine, but Test Studio comes with inbuilt schedulers and reporting systems that would let you schedule and execute tests unattended and also in parallel. So some of the things that Test Studio definitely provides you with. So at this time, I hope, you know, we're just starting to get into the meat of things. And before I can, maybe I have a quick poll for you to take. This is about what tool are you currently using for doing your automation? So is it Selenium? Is it using QTP? Is it using Telerik Test Studio? Or is it Microsoft Visual Studio's coded UI? Or something else, or nothing at all? So I'm just going to give it about 30 seconds for the polls to close. Please do give us a minute, and almost about, I notice a lot of you have already voted, almost 70 people, 70% have voted. So I'm just waiting for a few more seconds for you to respond. We really want this so that I can tune the presentation as we go forth more suitably. All right, thank you so much. We have almost about 80% people voted, and I still see a few more votes trickling in. If you've not yet voted, please do give it a second to vote. All right, almost 85% have voted, and I think I can close the poll now. There we go. All right, so this is good. The results of the poll are that 20% of you have been using Selenium, almost 10% are on QTP, 20% of you are on Test Studio, so that's a great number for today. And of course, you don't have to then worry about quite a bit of things we're going to talk, but you're going to definitely learn something. 15% on Microsoft Visual Studio or coded UI, and almost 30% or 33% who have not done either any coding or any automation, or are using some other tools. So thank you so much for that. Let me move back to the presentation in just 1 second. Okay, great. So let us start with first understanding the agile testing and what are the challenges that agile testing brings to table, and then how can we use Test Studio to solve that problem. So the thing is, with automation, you have to have code available before you can actually automate it. Ultimately, this means that you have the last minute rush where you have to spend the nights testing the code that developers have developed. But this scenario has been in existence ever since developers started writing code. The new complication, however, is this agile testing. In the agile world, when both testing teams and development teams are sitting together and planning a sprint, developers would be actually consuming up all the time that is available for doing the sprint, because not really their fault. It is also, they're also time boxed to deliver specific functionality in very, very specified and finite view of time. So given this, they're trying to do their best, and us as testers have new challenges. While we can start writing test cases, that leaves very little time at the end when the code is delivered to actually start doing the testing. For those of you who've been doing manual testing in the past with your test cases, it is an even worse scenario, because as you get the code or the code that the developers hand over in like the last day or the day but one, you have to spend those nights really working on those test cases and manually doing them. So the case for automation is even stronger, by which you will not have to spend those nights. If you've already written your automation, anytime the code drops in, you just run them. You know most of the cases are going to pass because you've done that based on the code earlier. But then for those of the code where the development has broken the code or changed the code somewhere, you will be then able to go ahead and change your automation scripts a little bit. So we thought about thinking, because this was a trend that was evolving, and testers all over the world were talking about the new challenges that this is bringing for the whole automation engineering team. So we thought, can we not let people begin writing automation before even developers hand over the code? Is it possible really how to do it? And then we thought, let's try and build up a solution, and this is pretty revolutionary actually, to actually let them build this automation code even before the code is ready. So you can actually now begin writing your automation from the beginning of the sprint itself. So at the end of it, you've almost completed 60 to 70% of the task, and all that remains is that final 30%, which you can still ultimately go ahead and do, and we'll just talk about this. The specific feature in Test Studio that we have is called IntelliMap. Now the feature IntelliMap is actually very simple. What it does is, even before your test or your code is ready, all you end up doing is defining elements in air, like you define there is going to be a username, there's going to be a password, and then there's going to be a login button. Let's say you've just seen the mock-up of how the code is going to come up with. So you take that mock-up, and in your automation tool, you're going to define the input fields. You're going to say there's going to be a username, there is going to be a user password, and then there's going to be a login button. And then you're going to write your automation script around it as well, which means you can write your validations for username, you can write your validations around password, you can create your combinations of positive test cases, negative test cases, and then click on the login button and then see if it is working or if it is not working. So we've done this, but then the code cannot run, or your automation cannot run before the code is ready. So what you ultimately end up doing is wait for the code to be delivered, and then the moment the code is delivered, you just start mapping your definitions of what you've already said in the past, which is there's going to be a username or a user input, there's going to be a password input, with the real IDs of the controls that become visible to you during the development, after the developers have delivered that code. So while this is a lot of talk, I think the best proof is actually seeing it. Let me bring Test Studio in focus as of now for you, so that take a look. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with the Test Studio, let me just very quickly give you a 2-minute rundown of what Test Studio is or how does it work. So what you see here are actually 3 panes. You can forget that 4th pane here. But basically you have 3 panes. Here it's a ribbon interface, very modern. What you have is the left element contains all the projects that we are going to author. And there's a tab at the bottom which says elements. So this is going to house all your element. This is your element repository, and it's going to house all the definitions for your elements. The middle section, this big one here, is responsible for showing you all the test scripts you author, and the one on the right-hand side, which is titled as Step Builder, is going to be again a tabbed interface which is going to let you author your test steps. So as you can see, there are properties, there is a step builder, and then there is integration with Team Pulse, which is something which is our agile project management tooling, also a bug management tool, but we are not going to be covering that in this presentation. At the top is the menu and the ribbon bar. As you can see, it's contextual. So when you're in the project name, so you can see I am currently, the project name is webinar demo, and the moment I put webinar demo up, there is the settings that lights up. And as I mentioned, this is contextual, so this will change as I move from a project to a test or the type of test that I am in. I've brought up test settings because this is an important thing to look at. Script options, a lot of settings here, but few things I would just quickly leave you with. Script options would allow you to integrate additional assemblies for your automation. This time I'm going to use one specific one called system.drawing, which is part of a .NET framework, and I will, just as we go through, I will show you why we have used that. And then this one, which is browsers. If you're going to be doing automation, we recommend that you do calibration first. I have IE and Chrome on my machine. I'm going to be mostly working with IE today, and as you can see, if it's not calibrated, okay, if it's not installed, it'll say install, but if it's not calibrated, it would say something to the tune of calibrate. So you need to be sure that this is showing calibrated so that we are able to inject our add-in to the specific browser. And you also have bug tracking capabilities. Currently, we support Team Pulse, we support Team Foundation for those of you coming from Visual Studio background, and for those of you who are coming from Jira, we also have support for bug management in the Jira server as well. All right, so with that, there are many more settings. I will kind of leave it there. But then this is the this is the menu. On the left, this is the record panel. This is our data source management panel, scheduling panel, and things like those. The moment I switch to a test case or a test script, for example, this is the test script that is authored for hamburger menu, but I will leave that. Let me go into another one. As you can notice, now the middle screen now hosts all the specific test steps that have been recorded in the test script. All right, so let's actually try and go to a page, or let me bring up a page where you know, or think about a simple scenario where you have this login scenario that we just talked about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to browse to an application here, which is already hosted on the web. You can even go there yourself. So before I can, I'm going to add a new test, and I'm going to say, what I'm going to be doing is a login test. So I'm going to be recording it as a login verify. So we are going to verify if the login is working or if the login is not working. So the moment I click into login verify, you will notice the test script is completely empty. And I will click on this record button on the extreme left top, and I will choose Internet Explorer. You can choose to record it in Chrome as well. Recording it with IE has an advantage where you can actually attach to any running instance of IE at this time. So it is actually the IE has already started, but it's on my other window. Let me just grab that screen in. Okay. All right, so that's the screen. All right. So the first URL that I'm going to go to is going to be the growing planet. Not sure. Okay, just give me a second. I think that was not able to copy the URL properly. Okay, great. So the moment I click on start recording, a recorder panel also comes up. So I have the recorder, which is actually a free floating panel or pane. I can move from a screen to another with this panel really. And I think it's still going to the URL. Hopefully this is still live. Great. Now, as you can notice, in the recorder panel, I have the whole element repository, the whole of DOM mentioned here, which is HTML, and then I can expand, and still the actions and verifications can still be done through the recorder panel. Now, let me go back to the Test Studio, and let's see what happens here. All right, so anyway, so now as you can see, while this is a page which is live, I do not have a login screen at this time, and I don't know if it is going to come up or it has not been written yet. All I can see is there is a login link available here that I will be clicking, and pretty much you can think of it as really a mock-up. So really what will happen is if I click on login, you will get the screen where you'll be able to actually do the login. So let's assume even this does not exist at the time that you're going to write this test. You only know this interface. Let us actually go ahead and record this specific test, and let's see how this is going to work. So at the back, I think I can remove these two steps. I'm just going to probably, and here is a quick thing also, I can probably just try and copy a test step from one test script to another. Control-C to Control-V is just fine. So if you did not know, this is Control-C, Control-V, and it works beautifully well. All right, so let's now go into our element repository. Notice I'm switching from project to element tabs. And what I'm going to now do is start adding new elements even without knowing what elements exist. So let's click on this page, which is add elements. And in this element, this is just, it's titled under predefined elements. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename it so that it is done properly, or I can use it later properly. And I'm going to just call it the login link. So the login link is an element which I do not know at this time if it exists. I just know it's going to be a simple link that I'm going to be clicking on. All right. What is the second thing that I'm going to be using? I'm going to be entering a username. So I'm going to be renaming it. I'm going to be calling this username text box. As you can notice, I really have nothing that I am writing these elements against. I'm just continuing to define them. I can now call this password text box. And finally, I will have an element which I would like to rename as login button. So notice I have defined all my elements already, and currently there is no element which it is mapped with, but I can still do certain actions. I can record certain actions on them, which is I will go into login link, and if you notice I've selected this element here. In the step builder, so notice there will probably you will be on this one, this tab on the right hand side. All you have to do is switch to step builder, and select this link, which is going to be Step Builder. And in the Step Builder, you have some actions, which are quick actions, mouse actions. You can author verifications, or you can author some other common steps as well. So never mind. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say enter text in login link. So I'm going to add this step in my test script, and the text that I'm going to enter is test user. Notice I still do not know if this is going to exist, what the ID of this link. I know nothing. I'm just recording it based on a prototype that I have really seen. So this is how it will start. The next thing I want to do is, after I have clicked on this link, sorry, so this login link is something that I recorded incorrectly. Actually, what I should be doing on it is doing a left click on this login link. So sorry, I will go here. I will say, well, left click on this. Now this should actually open up the username text box. I will go into username text box, and then I will say enter text, add step, and this is where I'm going to add my user. I'm going to go to password. I'm going to say enter text in password, add ABC123. Okay, sorry, my keyboard acting up. Okay, ABC123, and then the login way to another. Click the login button, say add step. So click on the login button. It should be fine. And I also want to verify that the next page should have a log out button, which is my verification of saying that the logout or the login has been successful. So I can add another link here on element here. I can rename it. Okay. Builder. I'm just going to now actually not do an action, but do verification, and I'm going to say verify that this is visible. So I can do that, and I can add a new step. All right, so actually, if you notice, we've already recorded our login verification. So you've done quite a bit of work. As I mentioned, 50–60% of work you've already finished by doing this much. Now let's say you're ready. I will kind of save this and I'll leave it there. I'll wait for the developers to, I'll write my test cases. I will wait my developers to give me the code, and the code is dropped. So they've told me that, okay, we have a deployment and this is how this looks like. Now is the time when I start actually mapping certain things to certain elements. At this time, if I execute and it's still not linked, if you notice, it does not make sense, and it's actually not going to do anything at all. So even if I did something, it's just going to navigate, and that's pretty much it. There is nothing else that it's going to be to do, because nothing else is defined. All right. So what I'm going to do is at this time start to map the elements. So I can start by looking at these individual elements and start mapping them. Okay, what I will do is I will start click this link, which is for element mapping, and it'll ask me pick app to start element mapping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the welcome page, which was the first page we had gone to. It will show you, it'll ask you to again open up the browser. We have the window open, so I'm just going to close that. Okay, and then I'm going to say record. Sorry, I'm here. Give it a second. It's still loading. I'm running faster than the automation. In case you have questions, you can please enter them in the window as well. Right? Okay, let's. Still loading. Okay, let me abort from here. Just a second. I think it's not in a clean state. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go into the URL, which was HTTP growing planet, and I think it wasn't login, it was welcome. I can now click start mapping, IE, record. It has gone back to this page. It is asking me to, is definitely wrong. Any which way, we can map. Okay, great. So all we want to really map this link to is, okay. So all I need to do is select the element I want to map and then highlight the specific element from the browser. So this is my browser, and sorry, the recorder is not visible then. Okay, so there are two floating independent panes. All I do is select on login link, and this is the link that I actually want to select. So the moment I hover over it, there is this little thing that comes up that says select element, and it is showing me this particular DOM element, which is there. It's also showing me the identification logic. It says ID is exactly login link and tag name is exactly A. Sounds like a great locator for my element, and I'm just going to click on then map element. Notice what happens the moment I click on the map element. It has moved away from the predefined elements, and it is latched into the login link that we have here. So it is moved into this login link. Now I already have a pre-recorded test that I had done earlier. So you will notice elements disappearing from predefined elements and landing up in these elements here because primarily we've already done most of the work and it's just going to move because we maintain a single element across all the pages that we have. All right, so let me go back and see the second thing that we want to map, which is going to be let's say username and text box, something wrong. All right, let me close this once again. Something has gone definitely wrong here. I think I was just being very quick. Okay. Sorry, that sort of is taking time. What I can do is go back and try and close the recorder once. Hopefully it will help. All right, probably give it a second to come up. Sorry, demo god's not happy today. Any which way, let me go ahead and I think you've gotten the gist of how this moves, and I'm not sure why this is stuck up like this, but we'll come back here in a second. Why don't we look at the next thing that I was going to show you, but anyway, we'll come to this as well once again. The second thing that I was going to talk about is flexible locators, and most of the times this is an issue when you have tests that run or that are recorded well and immediately upon execution may actually start to fail. So to take care of those things, what we have discovered is most of the times the locators, so Test Studio is intelligent enough to pick a locator by itself. However, that may not be the most optimum locator for your specific scenario. In that case, what you need to be doing is modifying the locators. We've seen some amount of logic that locator uses. For example, when we had done the quick element mapping there, we had to come up with sorry, this is still here. We had to come up with the specific ID or the logic to identify that element. So how do we build that element in a flexible manner is what is most important. Some of the other challenges, controls can change their IDs at runtime, and sometimes control don't even have IDs. For those of you working with XPath alone, there may be an issue because the position may change. If you've used an attribute with an element, that may change. So really what you have left with is a strategy that you have to think of for creating flexible and more, I would say, more robust locators. So Telerik Test Studio has capabilities to not build specific exact match-based locators. We can also use regular expressions, contains, does not contain, and those kind of fuzzy logics. So we'll look at that again as we get back into the demo, if the demo gods come back and help me. And in case of a property which is extremely useful for building flexible locators is inner text. An inner text property in HTML we found can be used for most of the cases, and combining that with the fuzzy logic that we had talked about a little earlier, which is containing either a regular expression or is based on contains, we can actually build this application quickly and in a more robust fashion as well. So we'll take a look at that in case we are, and the specific case we will look at is if we are going to build or we are going to find a specific row in a table, and in that table we are going to find a row with a name, let's say Abhishek, and then we're going to identify that using the flexible locator. So irrespective of where that row occurs, if it occurs on the first or is the last row in a specific table, we'll still be able to get to that row using the flexible locator logic. All right, let's move on, and there's a demo that we'll cover. But the next topic is JavaScript. I'm just covering this so that I can get to doing the test demos quickly at just one go. JavaScript is another big problem. When you have JavaScript, the infestation is sometimes you have dynamic content that only gets loaded when you do certain actions on the page. This is probably something that you've always felt. So you have probably done and included some explicit wait, saying please wait for 10 seconds and then go on from there. The problem with including those specific wait seconds is irrespective of whether the element arrives early or later, you're going to be waiting for 10 seconds as well. Now, this is something of what we call as AJAX, and as more and more JavaScript gets included, AJAX calls are getting more and more, present in the application. The challenge with automation is that most of the automation tool works with the DOM. So DOM is the object model that is maintained by the browser in memory. DOM is not really the UI that you see. Working on DOM, the browser actually renders the page and adds JavaScript, CSS, and every other piece that is there. So DOM is that object model in the memory. Most of the automation tools will actually try and inject elements or values directly in the DOM in the interest of speed. Now, Test Studio also gives you a capability to work directly with the real UI. So when you're working with the real UI, you will actually be injecting elements and values directly in the UI rather than working against the DOM. It has a drawback and it has an advantage. The advantage is clearly that JavaScript expects you to be working with real UI, key presses, triggering off of a JavaScript, a particular script or a function is dependent on the UI actions. So when you're working with the real UI rather than the DOM alone, you're able to trigger JavaScript functions, AJAX calls that they trigger without any issues or without any workarounds, so to say. Test Studio has this capability built in, and it's called Simulate Real Click or Simulate Real Typing. The downside of this, and you have to be careful about it, is that it is slower than actually working with DOM. And number two, you need to be actually available, or the machine needs to be available it should not be in a locked state when you're actually running this automation, because in that case there is real UI that the automation tool is trying to work with. In addition, Test Studio also has a wait construct, which allows you to wait for a specific period of time, but if the condition is already met before the time expires, it can then move on from there. So this construct is definitely better than putting a specific time for waiting of a completion of a particular amount of time, so that when you have a condition that is already met in 2 seconds, you don't actually have to always wait up to 10 seconds. This may speed up your test suite much more, because you will realize things adding up 10 seconds everywhere will be a really long when you think about even a test suite which is just about 50 of such waits. So 50 into 10 seconds each is about 500 seconds each, and you can imagine you're just waiting for doing nothing. And then of course Test Studio has the capability to invoke JavaScript directly from automation, so that is another capability that Test Studio provides you. And in the responsive design area, which was the fourth topic for the day, while I have just shown it to you, probably the responsive design, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is a very simple concept in which the same code will be working on different screen form factors. So if you're working on the web with large screens like 2480 or anything a large size on a screen, the responsive design makes sure that when the screen size scales down, for example, when you're on the tablet, this should convert into a view. The layouts should change, certain images should disappear, and things should happen so that it renders beautifully well on tablet. And further, when it comes down to a specific mobile device, it should still continue to work with, again, new layouts in page, certain elements appearing, certain elements disappearing, and so on and so forth. The magic of responsive design is made possible by CSS3 and a specific feature of CSS3 called media queries. So media queries give you the capability, or give developers the capability, to actually trigger different CSS styles when different form factors are, or screen form factors are encountered by the page. So the same page, when you look at on a screen, will look different, and then when you look on tablet, will look different. From an automation or testing perspective, here are the things that we need to do. One, we need to be actually checking different browser size. So your automation tool needs to be changing the browser size depending on what form factor you want to test against. So if it's a web form factor and it's been defined, let's say as 1280 by 1024, you use that form factor and you set the screen to be of, or to be sized exactly at 1280 by 1024 using the automation tool. If it's, let's say, going to be a tablet and you're just probably saying that my tablet screen is 1024 by 768, then you can again go and manage that screen size and then again check. So first is that capability. The second is you start checking for different things. So for example, you want to check for visibility of elements. So is it visible? Is it not visible? Then you have to check for specific CSS classes. So this means you have to see if that particular CSS class is available or is it not available. So those things, or which specific class is actually working with that particular element. And finally, the layout. And I've put a question mark in there as well, because while we can do some of the things with the responsive design checking, we really cannot do a comprehensive responsive design assurance with automation alone. For example, the layout issues may be when two elements are laid all on one another, and let's say the text rides over into the other element. Maybe automation may not be able to test it. And in that case, what you do require is probably a screenshot via the automation tool so that a manual tester can come and identify if things look great. So that capability, and I'm just trying to solve a problem or mitigate that issue rather than it's not solving it, it's just mitigating it, where you're still able to go ahead and see visually what was going on. You can actually also include, if you're going to do a manual test, I've talked about an assisted manual test, you can actually include a manual inspection step in your test as well to see visually if everything is looking fine. So well, with that, the 4 topics are covered, but let's quickly now go back into demo. The last time around, there was some major mishap that had happened. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off Test Studio once again, and hopefully in the time that we have, very little time, we'll be able to see some more magic that had to happen. All right, Test Studio coming up in a second. And in case you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A panel. I will be looking at them in a few minutes. I know Lohit is already answering quite a bit of them, but in case there are more, please feel free. We'll definitely be answering them here. In case we are not able to answer them, we will go back and answer them in the blog post that we do. All right, so I am just starting my test script once again. Drag this in. It's loading the test script. Okay, great. So we were in our login verify test script. We were going to be, so we've already recorded our scripts, and what we had was that you know, the elements which were predefined, but they were not yet linked with any specific page. So let's go back and try and map them again with a specific location. So let's go back to this location and say start mapping. Again, it is going to open up that page. You will be mapping when your developers have handed you the code, though my script is already ready. So let's give it another second and the recorder should come up. All right, this seems to be working fine at this time. You will notice it says at the bottom, elements mapper is connected, and we can start mapping now. All right, so our developers have said that you know, you need to click on this login button before this can come up. So I'm going to remove this highlight element and then behave normally, and then this login button becomes available. So I'm here and I'm on this username text box, and I'm going to again say highlight element, and I'm going to select this text box. So the moment I select this text box, it says select element. What it is going to do is, again, it's going to show me the DOM, and it's going to say ID is exactly username, tag name is exactly input. So these are our locators. This again seems fine, so I'm going to say map element. I'm going to go to password text box, and I'm going to select this password text box. Seems fine. Select element. It's showing you where in the DOM it is available. It's input name, password, ID, password. So ID is exactly password, tag name is exactly input. Sounds right. I'm going to map this element as well. Then there we have a login button. So when we go back into the login button, let's open that login button quickly, and you will notice that is our login button. It's not highlighted right now, but then we still can do the select element with the login button. All right, so the pane is here. ID is exactly login button. Tag name is input button, which is just fine. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to say map element, but unfortunately, since this is not active, okay, hold on. Yep, so since this was not active, the login button I had not selected, it did not know what to map to. So now finally that's also mapped. Now this is the logout link and this will come up when actually I make that or enter that specific value. So I'm going to write those specific values in here. So test user, and I think the password was ABC123. Let's see if this works by clicking on login link. Beautiful, it did work. And in this page now I go back into the logout link and again highlight element, and this was the logout link that I want to use. So let's go here specifically and say select element, ID is exactly top menu, tag name is exactly div. Not right. This isn't what I wanted to select, so I will try and make a selection again. Sorry. Nope. Okay. All right, now I think we have it. So what I'm now going to say is select element, and as you can see, it is now selected the right element, which is ID is exactly logout link and tag name is exactly A. Now I can map this element again. So as you can see, I have mapped all the elements, and there is no other undefined or predefined element left. So with that, I can actually now close my recorder or close my window here, which will also close it. And why don't we now run this test? Because now, ideally, just by mapping, we've already recorded all the actions before. I would have been able to, I should be able to actually run this test and see what is going on. So give it a second, and I know we just at about the time for the webinar, but if you give me another 10 minutes, I should be able to show you all the things that we talked about. So with test user ABC123 password entered, we are on verify logout link is visible. It is, I think, it is stuck here. It is verifying that element logout link is visible, and as you can see, it is still here, and that page did not open up at all. Now this is a case in point again, and this test will fail. As you can see, these steps have passed, and this was the step where it failed. So if I click on this button, it will actually start to show you what the issue was. It is telling you that it was unable to locate this element, and hence the search was failed. So if you go and look at the images, what you expected to see was at least that page which had the grid and everything, but it did not have that, which means there was some other issue. It didn't even it didn't even go there. So this pretty much is giving you a good idea. And if you notice, the login button still is grayed out. So this gives you a quick idea that there was something wrong that was going on. So why don't I go up to step 5 and check what was going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm going to click this, and I'm going to, this is something that you would probably need to do quite often called as test maintenance. So I will actually try and go there and ask it to run up to the login button page, or the login button step, where we're just about to click it. This is actually just going to run up to there. It seems everything is fine, and it is on the 5th step, and the recorder is again connecting back, or the automation framework is connecting back to the IE window. All right, the automation is connected. Now, as you can see, this specific login button is not highlighted. So seems like there is an issue with this button itself. What really happened, and I actually went out and had a word with my developer, what he said was the way we are recording login is if I actually went into this and I did some actual typing. So the moment I did some actual typing, you will notice that the login button starts becoming visible. So, you know, this is something that my developer told me. So now we have an issue where JavaScript key press was used. So there was some UI actually that was required to be actioned upon. Now the way Test Studio handles it is very, very simple and beautiful. All you really need to do, I'm going to remove this step, this was just to demonstrate it. All you really need to do is, remember I talked about using or working directly with the React UI. all you can do is say simulate real typing. So the moment you say simulate real typing, Test Studio would, instead of dumping it directly into the UI or into the DOM, will actually be working with the UI. And remember, I had told you this is a slower step than actually pumping it into the DOM directly. So with this approach, hopefully everything would just work fine. Now this time I'm not going to run up to here. I'm probably going to set up a debug step. So this is a breakpoint, and automation will run up to here and then break it. So I'm going to run up to here and I'm going to run the test, execute the test. So it should start executing. On the browser, you will see the page come up. All right, test user being written, and this will break at this step. As you can see, there are debug options available. Now it is waiting to click on the login button. But if you notice this time, the login link is the login button is actually visible. Now this is beautiful because now when I click on the button which says execute this step, which is it has to click, you will notice it has clicked and it just went to the next step. Now if I went to the next step, which is verify element logout link is visible, let's see, yep, and this was verified that this element logout link is visible. So this just worked fine, and this was, as you can see, all green all the way. So this is how actually I've been able to write my test before even the test existed, before the code existed. I was able to map it to my running code. I was then able to solve one of the major problems that JavaScript introduces, which is key press and things like those. While the solution that I showed you seemed very simple, just click a button, it took a lot of effort from our end to actually bring this to fore, because what we have done is we've, instead of writing and working with the DOM, we have started to actually work with the real UI at this stage. So this is how you can work with the real UI. But at this stage, I'm not going to go further into and delve deeper into JavaScript. Sorry, there was this small problem. What I'm going to do is I'm trying to go and create and find a new and try to use a flexible locator. Now to let's say record a new flexible locator, I'm going to add a new test. Let's say find Abhishek row. Okay, and I'm going to say create. Now this is a new test, but even for this new test, the first step I have to do is login. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm not going to record the whole thing again because I've already recorded it in the login verify. Here is a case for composable tests. So what I'm going to simply do is actually use this, the test that I had recorded earlier and add it into this test script as a step. So I'm going to go into my step builder, going to select common, and one of the step builder steps is test as a step. So when I click on test as a step and say add step, it is going to ask me which test do you want to use as a step in your entire script. So I had already written my login verify test. So I'm just going to select this and include the whole test that I had recorded, which was a login test, to actually be a step in this whole script. Now I have this whole test and I want to continue recording from there. So I'm going to say run to here, which will basically execute the whole test and then make it available for automation. So this is a case where composable tests has been used. Now the benefit of using this composable approach is that if, let's say, tomorrow your login logic changed or your screen changed, you will only have to make that change in one test, which is the login verify test, and any other test which was using the login verify test would automatically get updated. So you don't have to go hunting where all was this screen used. You just update it at one place, and if you've used composable tests, all of that will become available to you. Now, what I want to do, this is still kind of automating, but what I want to do in this step is very, very simple. This is a big grid, and identifying any row in this grid is a big challenge, and you're pretty much familiar with that. The problem being the grid may have 5 elements today, tomorrow it may be 10. You may even have a setting that says, okay, 10 elements only, 5 elements only, and so on and so forth. And then somebody may actually click on email and then sort it by email, so on and so forth. If you notice, this is Abhishek Kant, and I want to select this. There are multiple ways of actually selecting this row, but what I want to show you is a very simple strategy, and this is not the only strategy of selecting this particular row by using the concept of a flexible locator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the recorder. Remember, the objective is very simple. We want to try and capture this row. I'm going to highlight this element. I'm going to go into this, and what it is doing is, as you can notice, it is showing me all of this. I'm going to, since you can notice I'm seeing some extra tabs here, Test Studio is intelligent enough to give you the whole table or give you different levels of abstraction or overlap. In this case, HTML table row. All I'm going to do here is check if, let's say, element is visible, or let's even make it simple. We just are going to say add to elements. Okay. Now table row, I want to call it the Abhishek table row so that it is clear. All right. Now add element. Okay. Now at this time it has added Abhishek table row. Let me pause recording here and go back into my element repository. So if you notice, I have this Abhishek table row already available here. Let's see what, and as we mentioned, Test Studio earlier has already used some amount of logic that it can to come to this Abhishek table row locator. So what is that specific element that Abhishek table row has used? Let's go back into properties and see. The fine logic it has used is contains tag index, which is tr9. So essentially what this has done is it says the row which is table row number 9 is the row that Abhishek has to be, that row has to be selected and any verification written against it, and so on and so forth. So this may not be the right, fine logic, because table number 9 or row number 9 may be different in the next run that I come up with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this element's find logic by saying edit element and find in the live version. So I currently don't have a page open, so why don't I go and do browse and navigate once again. Sorry, I had closed that window earlier. So it's again going to connect to a Test Studio screen. Okay. All right, it's right here. Okay, I'm going to go in, test user, APC123, log in. All right, great. Now, if I go back here and I say validate, well, there. Now that the page was visible, it was able to validate it, because fortunately in this run, Abhishek is still on the 9th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, still the 9th row. So this was good, but this is something that I think is not a good locator for my table. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go into the DOM, and let's say I want to first search. So one of the elements that was there was my email ID. So I had abhishek.kant@telerik.com. So let's look at what it had. So it had a filter for the table. Let's see if that is the right thing. It seems right to me, because you have the T body, and in that you have the table with ID contact. So sounds right. The next thing that I want to do is go into this, and the element that I need to locate, or the row that I need to locate, should have abhishek.kant@telerik.com. This probably is the right way to find my element. So this probably does not seem the right thing. So, well, I will simply delete it. What next? What should I do? So why don't I add a sub filter to it? And in this, what I do know is the tag name is going to be tr. Okay, so I'm going to put in tr. And what other condition I can include? Here is where I can use the element called inner text. So the inner text is a consolidation of all the text in a particular element. And abhishek.kant@telerik.com. But hold on, before I do this, why don't we go and look at, okay, I've already spoiled the suggestions. If I do this at this time, what it's going to do is it's going to go and look into the inner text and say, is it exactly abhishek.kant@telerik.com? And if it is not going to be, because if you notice in the page here, you had in inner text, you will get a lot more than abhishek.kant@telerik.com. There is Abhishek, there is Kant, there is this, there is my LinkedIn profile, there is view contact. All of this text would be available in inner text. So what I'm going to do is, instead of using the exact match, which is exactly, I'm going to choose a different one, which is contains. Other ones are obviously available. Partial match is what we call. So if I'm going to choose contains abhishek.com, you can see I can then do a validate, and yes, it has still been able to find this element. So now when I do save, I can be sure that this row is visible. Oh, so this row is the one that I actually wanted to select. So I can now select this, go into Step Builder, and probably just, you know, choose a very quick verification. I don't know, let's say content with row, or just say simply visible. So I can just say visible, and now anywhere the application or the row goes, this will be tested as positive, and this would be something that is much more robust. The way we had to jump a little hoop here and there was simply because we wanted to write a more flexible locator, so that the tests run after run do not break down, and those weird issues of, you know, it was running in the last run, but this run it seems to fail, is no more a problem for you, and you know exactly what you had written the test for and what exactly went on. And as you can see, both the tests have passed, so you know that this was something that was very, very useful. So well, the one final thing that I want to leave you with is going to be about responsive design. And I'm going to just show you very simple responsive design application right now. For doing that, I'm just going to actually open up again. Let me just close this run. It's just been recording here. This was the same error I did last time. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a page which is written as a responsive design, and what we want to verify is what we will also very quickly check. So in this case, I'm going to start again, and I'm going to go to that page so that you know what exactly it is. Here it is. If you notice, and notice the top header bar at this time, there are a bunch of things here as well, but we're just going to look at this top screen, top header actually. So if I start reducing the size of this header, which is what on a tablet may happen, you notice the first thing that happens at a certain place or a certain size, and the markers thankfully have been provided. So it's approximately when you go below 1024, what happens is these three buttons, about, pricing, try now, disappear. Okay, so that is how it was done to begin with. Notice the rest of the things are still fine. Now, if I continue to collapse this further, I collapse it and I collapse it and I collapse it. Notice what happens. Even the buttons at the top, or the navigation buttons at the top, disappear, and it gets replaced by a simple hamburger menu. But I click on this hamburger menu, and you've all of these elements visible very, very quickly. So probably this transition happens when the size is even lower than 768. All right. So how do we replicate this test? Because the first thing that you will need to do is set this browser window to a specific size, and then verify if, let's say, well, this hamburger menu is visible or not, for example. So let's do this. I've already recorded this test for you. Very, very simple. The first thing I'm doing is navigate to that page. Now that you know, I'm adding actually a coded step, so you can actually write code even within Test Studio, and the coded step is extremely simple. all I have done is I've taken the active browser and I have resized it using the system.drawing functionality from the .NET space, and I have said resize the browser window to be exactly 1024 in width and 768 in height. So that's the normal .NET API. The 00 refers to the start coordinate. So 00 is like the top left. So that's all there is done. And then in the next step, what I've tried to do is capture the browser state. So capturing the browser state is basically when I'm going to be capturing the browser. So an image of the browser will be taken, and the final verification that will happen is this button tag is visible. Now, if you want to see what that button tag is, you can actually go and first actually see what it was put as. What I'm going to do, a better way to actually show you this would be to go and say edit element and find in live version, probably browse and navigate. Let's see. So this is a simple hamburger button. We are trying to see if that hamburger button is actually visible or it's not visible. Okay, we are already on that page now. And as you can see, that button is still not visible, and here it comes back. Okay, so this is the button. When I'm on 1024, that button was not visible, but when I'm below 768, this button becomes visible. So truly all you can simply do is go here, look at the DOM, and we've already done that. The button element has been automatically identified for you. If you're really interested, it is in this header class, responsive header. There is, I think, in the div class for UL, one of those, or hamburger. Yep, that's the hamburger menu, the button class, rPanel toggle. This is the logic, or the specific logic that we've used is tag name, which is button tag, the header tag name, and in the button tag, the tag name is exactly button, and class contains rPanel toggle. Notice I'm not using exactly again. It is just a partial match that I'm using. So rPanel toggle, whenever that is available, it will run. So let's see if this test run succeeds. All I'm trying to test here is if the responsive design here works, which is with 1024, the button tag actually should not be visible. So it is not visible. So this test will pass if the size is set to 1024 by 768, and the button tag, which is the hamburger menu, or let me even better, well, you can actually rename these things, hamburger button, menu button. So the hamburger menu button should not be visible because at this stage it is not something that should be visible. So one of the responsive negative test cases. So the test is running. It should just come up on your screen now. Okay. All right, it was too quick. Well, but it was verified that the element is not visible. There was, oh, I'm sorry, this step was, sorry, I wanted to, it had been omitted. So this was not executed because we had removed this step. So let me just execute it very quickly once again. The test is running. Should be coming up quickly, very, very quickly. Okay, and here we go. Oh, and if you've not seen the test runner that comes out, that was also there. Okay, great. So now the test is run. All of the steps have passed. Let's go and see what was the browser state capture. What did it do? So here's my window. I am going into my documents where the visuals or the Test Studio projects are stored. Test Studio projects. The one that I'm using is called, I think, the webinar demo. I go in here. Notice all the tests are all the tests that we've written are here, which is login verify.ts test. And by the way, you can just take these tests as they are and put them into a simple source control if you're interested in that as well. Now, bin, you notice it is compiled into a DLL, and from those of you who are from .NET background would understand what that means. In the results tab, probably let me see. So this capture, the browser state capture should be visible, or did I change the location? Let me see, snapshot 360. This should have been reported here, but I think the settings would have been changed a little bit. Anyway, so that browser window capture is done in this step, and we've kind of done checking if the browser menu button was visible or not. How about we change the browser window size to something else? So why don't we reduce this to 768 by, I don't know, what should be the size, 540 to actually see a really, really small one. And in this case, it actually should be visible. So I'm going to just remove this again. And why don't we do a manual inspection here instead of the capture browser state? So all I really have to do is go here, go back into the step builder, pick up the common ones, and if you notice, the step is inspection point. So by setting up an inspection point, what it will do is it will wait for, it will basically open up the inspection window, and it'll just wait for you to say pass or fail. So I can just move this here and come up here as well. Inspection window, you can also use the manual step at this stage as well. So, well, let's run it once again, and let's see how it goes. The test runner is here. Let the test run. Okay, the IE windows open up on my other screen, so bringing it into. So, okay, as you can notice, it says inspect browser DOM at this point, and as you can see, the hamburger menu is very much there, right? So, well, this inspection just seemed fine. So this is something that was just working as well at this stage. The DOM Explorer, you can actually go ahead and inspect. In terms of visibility, you can actually write your CSS test cases as well at this stage. And what I will now do is let this, continue or stop. In this case, I can just say stop. So it is just going to stop this whole thing. So, well, or I could just let it continue. So, well, this is verifying that hamburger menu button is not visible, and of course it is going to fail because it was visible. So this is how you basically can look at the responsive design. In this case, if this was a positive test case, I wanted to make sure that this is visible, and in case I was going to run through this, I can just run through this again, and this would be visible as well. So with that, we've come to close of the presentation today. I know this was longer. Sorry about that. Once again, some major issues with the demo today. But in any case, I think we've shown what we wanted to. We've completed. Thank you for staying on for so long. Though we had an overrun, you kind of chose to be with us. Thank you so much, and let me take a few questions for those of you who've hung on till this time. Let me take a quick look into some of the questions that are there. And once again, if if your questions are not answered right now, we'll make sure to answer them in the blog post that we will be making with the recording on the web in the coming week. So with that, let me just put up a slide to say thank you very much for being here today. And I'll be now taking a look at the questions. We may stop the recording, and the video for the same will be available on telerikhelper.net in the coming week. We'll also send you a quick mail on the same. So Lohit, if you can just stop the recording, please. Thank you.